Good morning. I'm Shar Farley, a member of this fellowship, and I'll be your service leader this morning. We gather today on the unceded lands of the Muskogee Nation of Florida. We are grateful for this land. Like many of you, I initially came to this fellowship because my religious dogma and creeds of my childhood religion no longer seem to be relevant to my spiritual life. You might say that I became a religious dropout until I joined this fellowship back in 2002. It's here that I found not only friends who support me in my spiritual growth, but opportunities to serve others and make this place and world a better place. If you're new comer to our faith, you'll find more information about us on the back of your order of service and on our fellowship, our Facebook page, and on our website. After our worship service, everyone, including our visitors this morning, are invited to come for coffee and refreshments at the back of the sanctuary. And at 11:15, adults can choose among several discussion groups or choir rehearsal. If you're a singer, we always need more singers. There are two other discussion groups to choose from today. The first is the Speakers Circle, which will meet right up here, and we'll be discussing the perspective of the speaker that we hear this morning during our sermon portion. And in the across the hallway in the boardroom or library, Lauren Boyer will be leading a group on ancient religions. And then in the Harmony Room, Cecile will invite our choir members to come and get some practicing done this morning. And she also encourages newcomers to join us. At 11:15, that's when our second hour will begin. Also have, I think, Jane Park has an announcement to make. Jane?
Good morning. My name's Jane Park. Very, very quickly. Hi. Friendly folks today, friendly place. This is the last day to order t-shirts, like where you can really pick exactly what size. We'll make an order that's more than what we have, but what we get may or may not match what you need. So if you want to get the right size, the right style, today is the last day to sign up for that. I'll be in the back. Thank you.
And our finance chair, Judy Byrne-Riley, would like to remind you that this is Stewardship Month, and if you wish to make a cash payment to apply to your pledge contribution for the coming year, that you can put it in one of these envelopes. It's on the table right behind where Judy is sitting and where you sign your children up for their classes afterwards. So keep that in mind. All right, and I believe now that we are ready for our prelude that will take us into the service. Joshua, will you come forth and light our chalice for us this morning? Thank you. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, a sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Will you now please stand as you are able and help us sing our opening hymn, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit. It's number 8 in your gray hymnal, and the lyrics are also on the screen behind me. We gather in this sacred space, made more sacred in this moment by the presence and attention of each and every one of us. We gather with hearts broken, hearts open, seeking a greater, larger love. We gather, held in the embrace of both memories and of hope. May our gathering be for gladness. Come, let us worship together. And now I want to invite the children to come forth, have a front row seat here, and Joshua has a story for us today.
Hello. We have a few children. There's a big children. Well, this is good. Anyway, I wanted to first ask all of the children, you included, of course, what you find the most beautiful and inspiring about nature.
The sun,
The sun. Tell me why, just briefly.
because it connects us all.
Ooh, I like that.
Probably the trees.
Trees, why?
They're just all so unique, like all the different shapes of them. It's very interesting.
Trees are unique.
The connection between plants, carnivores, and herbivores, predators and prey. the fact that one can destroy others, but they live in balance because they figured out ways to evade and reproduce and outcompete for other species.
That is like super deep. I think Carl Sagan would be proud.
Flowers.
What do you like about flowers?
They are beautiful just the way we are.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Those are all really beautiful answers. So I'm going to tell you guys today some stuff I find beautiful, inspiring about nature. Easier. Sometimes our lives get so busy, so utterly full of stuff. A lot of this stuff can be things that we love, for sure, like our favorite movies or games, sports team, or a group of loving friends. But a lot of this stuff can be heavy, not so fun. And I don't know about you, but when I reach my breaking point, when I'm overwhelmed by my school, or stressed out by the news, or simply need to get away from all of this, that is when I go down to Turtle Pond. Turtle Pond is not that big. In fact, it used to be a water hazard before the golf course became a park. And when it was a golf course, it had very few turtles, if any, because of all the chemicals sprayed on the clean, green grass of the course. Those chemicals are long gone now, and so too are the acres and acres of trim, neat lawn grasses. Turtle Pond is healing. Now the scraggly scrubs around the edge grow wild, home to vining and branching blackberries that the children, along with the rabbits and the birds, crush their juicy berries between their teeth, spitting the little seeds out where some of them will, inevitably, find fertile soil and grow many more juicy, purpley blackberries. Turtle Pond has an old wooden bridge that runs through the middle, worn from years of soaking rainfall, beating sun rays, and speeding golf cart tires. Now, the old wood sings with the wet clippity-clop of toddler feet clambering to the edge, followed closely by their more sure-footed older siblings, knowing what waited for them in the mucky waters below. And you guys know, because you've been there, what is waiting for them? That's right. First one, then two, and then a whole mess of turtles pop their little adorable heads out of the water, peering right back at them. Their tiny turtle eyes seem to say, "Got any snacks?" And so, we give them offerings of apples and sometimes Cheez-Its. I know, but the soft-shell turtles really seem to love them for some reason. And who am I to argue with a soft shell? It's better anyway just to sit and listen. Turtle Pond will speak to you if you're quiet enough. I promise. Just find a comfy spot, get your squirming out first, do a little wiggle, and then take one deep breath. And then another deep breath. And just listen. Listen as the frogs join each other in a chorus fit for the greatest chapels of the old world. And hear the crickets chime in with punchy, percussive, somehow eerily beautiful chirps. And there, hear the hawk's piercing cry sail over the din like a shrieking flute, and the songbirds sing out their reply, a warning and a statement and a song all in one. Yes, Turtle Pond is healing, but it's also healing me. May you find your own turtle ponds. And when you do find that place, sit there
and breathe deeply. And if you're quiet enough, if you listen with all your heart, you just might hear your own turtle pond whisper back to you, "We missed you. Welcome home." May it be so, and amen.
Go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere you may go. Our lives are filled with joys, concerns, and milestones. If you have a special one that you'd like to share with us this morning, then this is the time to do it. Just come forth, say your name, take a petal from the bowl and put it in the water, and share with us so we can support you or feel happy for you. morning is our words from the Reverend David Blanchard, and will be followed by a quiet moment of meditation or prayer. How shall I pray, and to whom? Not with my eyes shut and my mind closed, but with sight clear and soul alive. I would pray first to the God within myself, which is the deepest longing for goodness that I know, and to the part of me which longs for direction and courage and strength to serve the values which build but do not destroy. And for what shall I pray? Not for miracles and easy answers, and not for God to excuse me my sins and grant my absolution. I would pray for those wonders which I can perform out of my own strength, and for my friends and loved ones to forgive my shortcomings and blunders. I would pray for bright ideas and insights for the purpose of helping to solve the problems that we have heaped upon us. I would pray for the end to needless suffering and pain, not for God to make it happen by some special trick, but for us to make it our special purpose. And why should I pray? Not because I expect some distant God to answer me in tongue or service, but to urge the better part of me to respond to all the needs and longings within myself, to order my thoughts, to clarify my frustrations, to outline those vague impulses for good that most of my life lie dormant in my heart and soul. I would pray because I know of no other way to speak, both kindly and harshly, to that part of my soul which yearns to be brave but is afraid. Amen. Our fellowship relies solely on the generosity of our members and friends. All cash and undesignated checks will be split with our March Share the Plate recipient, Opportunity Place. Opportunity Place provides emergency shelter to single women and families with children under the age of 18, which are in imminent risk of homelessness. The mission of Opportunity Place is to help women and families achieve a sort of sufficiency, self-sufficiency. Please be as generous as you are able. If you're paying your pledge today with a check, please write pledge on the memo line. Thank you. From you, I receive. As an introduction and preparation for hearing our recorded sermon this morning by the Reverend Heather Janules, I would like to share with you an excerpt from Subversive Suburban Soul by Reverend Victoria Stafford. She writes, "My family's favorite place to visit and view the sunset is a place where the westbound highway meets the much main commercial artery of our suburban city. There is a vast expanse of parking lot between the mammoth supermarket and the very large home improvement store. It is one deeply unholy place with miles of sprawling strip malls as far as the eye can see and further. Yet, more than once, on leaving the store, I have all but fallen to my knees because there the sunsets are astonishing, and the evenings when the full moon rises, they are breathtaking. This unlikely and unholy place offers so startling and memorable views that one time in the summer, when my family was camping in a far-removed wild wilderness, watching the sun melt down to the sea, my daughter sighed blissfully, snuggled closer, and said, 'Wow, this is so beautiful. This really reminds me of the shopping center on Highway 36. What makes a place a holy place? How much is what is there, and how much is what we bring to it, or what we choose to see? How I have been told that the parking lot is set upon a hill that not so long ago, perhaps 150 years ago, was in fact a sacred site of the native peoples living on this land, a stopping place between the one great river and another. A few remember that there was an ancient stand of oaks up there. It is known that the sun went down and heaven and prairie were engulfed each night in flames. It is known that the moon came up in splendor. Beneath the pavement, earth remembers everything. Everything is gathered in, for it is known, it is remembered, that the holy holds all weeping as well as all celebration, all desecration as well as all tenderness. Everything is gathered in. How could a place, once sacred, at once be rendered otherwise? And with these words, Adam will begin our sermon this morning. and we'll find the answers.
Thank you for your presence and attention, and for welcoming me into your time of worship. I'm the Reverend Heather Janules, a middle-aged white woman with short, chemically assisted reddish hair and Eastern European features. I'm wearing a green blouse with a gray shawl decorated with flowers and butterflies. I'm greeting you from my living room. A white mantle is behind me, as are a number of houseplants. It is amazing we can worship together in this way. Technology offers us so many different ways to connect across time and space. My only regret, though, is that while you're able to experience me and my ministry, I'm unable to experience your community gathering in this moment. Worship is a community endeavor. The word liturgy derives from the Greek phrase meaning the work of the people, and this engagement, this work, renders a place of worship rich with meaning. Considering the poignant human moments that take place in a sanctuary, the rituals, the memorials, the lighting of candles, the gathering in times of fear, of joy and sorrow, how can we not understand a place like this as sacred? How can we not experience a place like this as something more than the collection of wood and stone, glass and metal, carpet and furniture that it is? While I've come to appreciate all that takes place in a house of worship, I have been drawn to spaces set aside as sacred long before I became a minister. This fascination with sacred spaces has its origin in childhood memories. For about 2 years, my parents and I lived with my grandparents. I often companioned my grandmother to Mass at her Roman Catholic church, St. Casimir's, the Lithuanian parish in town. To be honest, I didn't really enjoy or understand the service. How can a 7-year-old make sense of a metaphor like Lamb of God? But I loved the space. The statues of saints brought over from Lithuania, the stained glass, the carvings depicting Stations of the Cross with captions in Lithuanian. For some reason, while the small bowl of holy water at the entryway froze in winter, when this happened, this consecrated water seemed all the more magical to me. And I had all these sensory experiences in the company of someone I loved, my grandmother. Much later, when I served a congregation in the Washington, D.C. suburbs, even though the modern and versatile design of that sanctuary was beautiful in its own way, worshiping in that space didn't quite feel right, as it looked so different from what I remembered from St. Casimir's. My reverence for sacred space, what we might call mystery's meeting place, is that ingrained and that strong. But I recently heard 2 stories about what we name as sacred and the spaces it inhabits that have inspired a number of questions for me. They affirm what I've come to know about sacred spaces, revered as they are for important moments in life, and at the same time, not necessarily confined to the walls of the sanctuary, the temple, the mosque, the gates of the shrine. I will now share these stories with you as an invitation to explore these questions in your own minds and hearts with one another. But before we explore these stories, though, I acknowledge the complexity of reflecting on sacred space within a Unitarian Universalist community. Defined by our theological diversity, I know that together we represent views from ardent atheism and evangelical rationalism to theism and mysticism and everything in between. This makes definition of sacred or mystery subjective, and for some, the use of the words problematic. I hope we can find common ground through the perspective of writer, poet, and ecologist Wendell Berry. He affirms that there are no unsacred places, there are only sacred places and desecrated places. I hear in his words an understanding often affirmed by various indigenous peoples, that all places, every place, is imbued with life and is therefore worthy of our attention, gratitude, and care, lest the source of this life be diminished, eroded, or blocked. How we understand this source varies, but I assume that we can agree that the spirit of life we sing about with great heart is something worthy of reverence. When Barry attests that there are no unsacred places, Victoria Safford's meditation, Subversive Suburban Soul, comes to mind. While reflecting on the very desecrated place of her local strip of retail stores, which is paradoxically also a place with breathtaking sunsets and moonrises, Safford affirms that beneath the pavement, earth remembers. Everything is gathered in, for it is known, it is remembered, that the holy holds all weeping as well as all celebration, all desecration as well as all tenderness. Everything is gathered in. The first story to help us explore the meaning of sacred space is a story of reclamation, of transforming a place of desecration to a place of dignity, shaping not only the physical environment, but how the people of this place function within it. It comes to us from an episode of the podcast Criminal titled, He's Neutral. I summarize the story this way. A man named Dan Stevenson and his wife have lived in the same house in Oakland for many years. While they love their neighborhood, urban life sometimes comes with challenges. For a long time, they've had to deal with petty crimes like drug use and theft. Dan says that calling the police often makes things worse, inspiring him, where possible, to adopt a live and let live approach with his neighbors. But there was one thing he could no longer tolerate. The city installed a road divider in front of his house. This small plot of land became a place where people dumped their trash. And with every dumping, it became a trash magnet, inspiring others to dump even more trash. Signs prohibiting dumping went ignored. Calls to the city went unanswered. Finally, Dan made a decision about what he wanted to do about the trash heap in front of his house. It took some time, but Dan took action, and what he did inspired others to act, and this changed everything. Dan bought a statue of Buddha to install in the lot that gathered so much trash. This was somewhat of an odd decision, considering Dan is not Buddhist and has no connection to Buddhism. Why Buddha? Unlike the statue of Jesus, Dan says. He's neutral. After reinforcing the statue with rebar so no one could steal it, Dan installed the Buddha. Now, in lieu of staring at a pile of garbage, he could look out his window each morning, coffee in hand, and look at Buddha instead. But then, sometimes, when he would begin his day with the Buddha statue, Dan noticed some mysterious appearances. No one had brought trash to the site, but there were other offerings, pears and oranges. One morning, Dan was surprised to see that someone had painted Buddha white. Later, Buddha was painted again, gold this time. Eventually, a small shelter appeared, protecting Buddha and giving local Buddhist pilgrims a way to comfortably pray in the rain. As time went on, the number of Buddhist devotees grew, coming every day to this former road divider turned trash heap, rendering the space across from Dan's house a sacred site. Feast days attract even bigger crowds. The community often brings Dan and his wife gifts of food in gratitude to him installing the Buddha. Despite the language barrier, the devotees speak little English and he speaks no Vietnamese. He tries to communicate that the Buddha is now theirs. In the end, while the correlation is unclear, since the trash dump has become a Buddhist shrine, crime in Dan's neighborhood has decreased by over 70%.
He's got a Facebook page. He's got a Twitter account. He's more connected socially than I am, you know. He's a great little guy, I guess. It has a security camera now. It has sound. He's got chants all the time, you know. It just kind of turned the whole thing around to zero. no more mattresses, and no more garbage, and no more graffiti, and no more hanging out. It's an amazing thing. It's like tossing the stone in the pond, it just ripples out.
Each time I hear this story, these questions come to mind. What inspired Dan, someone who has no ties to Buddhism, to address neighborhood blight by planting a Buddha statue? What did the local Buddhist neighbors make of the statue's mysterious appearance? How did their presence and their prayers and devotion influence the behavior of others in the neighborhood? And what was the unconscious inspiration that brought all of this into being? I first learned of our second story through the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, an exploration of creativity and spirituality and the bond between the two. She first heard the story from Ketut Lyer, a Balinese healer and one of Gilbert's mentors. Here is a summary of this other modern parable. The Balinese are known for the beauty of their sacred dances, an art form carefully passed down through the generations with profound dedication to tradition. When Western tourists began visiting Bali in the 1960s, they were fascinated by these traditional dances. The temples welcomed visitors, and the guests were happy to make a contribution to the temple in exchange. But while this arrangement worked for a while, in time, the regular presence of outsiders changed the experience of the temple, and some of the temples were remote and rustic, not necessarily the most hospitable spaces. The priests decided it would be better if the dancers visited the local resorts and performed there. This way, the visitors could experience the dance, and the temples could continue to receive the income from the grateful tourists. This also worked for a time. But then a number of what Gilbert calls high-minded Westerners became concerned that these sacred dances were happening outside the temple. The tourists feared that this whole arrangement was desecration of the sacred tradition from whence these dances came. So the priests came up with another solution. The dancers would continue to dance, but not the sacred dances. They would draw from their training to develop new dances, just for the tourist audiences. The visitors could then experience the dance, and the temples could continue to receive the income from the grateful tourists, and all could rest assured that no harm was being done to the holy tradition of Balinese sacred dance. Gilbert explains the conclusion of the story this way. Over the next few years, those silly, new, meaningless dances became increasingly refined. The young boys and girls grew into them, and working with a new sense of freedom and innovation, they gradually transformed the performances into something transcendent. It appeared that those Balinese dancers, despite all their best efforts to be completely unspiritual, were unwittingly calling down big magic from the heavens anyhow, right there by the swimming pool. All they'd originally intended was to entertain tourists and themselves, but now they were tripping over God every single night, and everyone could see it. The Balinese priests, noticing this phenomenon, had a wonderful idea. Why not borrow these new fake dances, bring them into the temples, incorporate them into the ancient religious ceremonies, and use them as a form of prayer? In fact, why not replace some of those stale old sacred dances with these new fake dances? So they did. At which point, the meaningless dances became holy dances, because the holy dances had become meaningless. And everyone was happy, except for those high-minded Westerners who were now thoroughly confused, because they couldn't tell anymore what was holy and what was profane. It had all bled together. The lines had blurred between high and low, between light and heavy, between right and wrong, between us and them, between God and earth. And the whole paradox was totally freaking them out. Which cannot help, but I cannot help imagine, is what the trickster priests had in mind. the entire time. Our first story was a story of bringing the sacred into the profane. The story is a story of the sacred communing with the profane, transforming into something even more profound. Indeed, as Gilbert puts it, it all bled together. Where are you seeing this transformation in the world, the sacred emerging from the sanctuary to only make the whole world a temple? How do you hold your traditions lightly enough so the power of the past and the inspiration of this moment are present in equal measure? What sacred practice are you willing to destroy to allow a new transcendence to emerge? It is perhaps fitting that I am preaching this sermon in my home. My love of sacred spaces has inspired me to decorate my house with an eclectic array of religious art, including a Victoria-era wooden pulpit turned ornate plant table I received through an online everything is free list. Over the pulpit plant table hangs a large framed stained glass piece, making my office like a small chapel. And in my dining room, a small Buddha sits beneath a photograph I took of that modern sanctuary, the sun shining through the glass walls. While I have learned much from the Buddhist tradition, like Dan Stevenson, I do not consider myself Buddhist, but I cherish this Buddha as it was a gift from a member of a congregation I served, recalling her kind generosity and the many wonderful things about that community. Now that I have heard the tale of the Buddha of Oakland, the small statue reminds me of what it means to engage in spiritual leadership. We are all called, each in our own way, to claim real estate for the sacred amid the great garbage of the world. This little statue reminds me that we are forever partners in reclamation. St. Casimir's, my grandmother's Catholic parish, offers another lesson about the dance between sacred and desecrated space. After my parents and I stopped living with my grandparents, I stopped going to church. I heard about life at St. Casimir's at family gatherings. As the migration of Lithuanian immigrants to the area ebbed, and the children of earlier immigrants either left the area or left the faith, the congregation became older and smaller, with more memorial masses than weddings. Amid its slow decline, a local man with mental health challenges responded to demands of the voices only he could hear. He broke into the sanctuary and smashed most of the statues. Even though I was not a member of that parish, my fascination with those statues as a child inspired me to grieve this great loss and the reality that we live in a world where sacred space can be violated. In time, the diocese merged St. Casimir's with St. Patrick's, the Irish Roman Catholic parish. By then, my grandfather had died, as did many of my grandparents' friends, so my grandmother, who never learned to drive and was likely too infirm to go behind the wheel anyway, was content to worship by viewing Mass on cable television. I guess this way of worshiping isn't so new, after all. But while the sanctuary of St. Casimir's, inspiring my love of consecrated space so long ago, is closed and empty, The parish converted the rest of its campus to affordable housing, transforming their spiritual home into homes for those who need them. The leaders of St. Casimir's remind me of those Balinese dancers, blurring the line between God and earth, as Elizabeth Gilbert might say. Part of spirituality is cultivating awareness that besides the literal walls that surround consecrated space, the lines between holy and ordinary are dynamic. The path between desecrated and sacred is often shorter than we think. We know that leading a faith community has always been a demanding spiritual practice, one that has become significantly more difficult in recent years. For large and small communities alike, new energy and inspiration seems to be coming when the people do their work in different ways, in ways that allow freer communion between what is within and what is beyond the sanctuary. Like Dan Stevenson, this means bringing the ministry to secular places. Like the Balinese dancers, this means welcoming strangers into the temple and allowing that relationship to shape the nature of temple life. What might this look like for you and your people? May we have the wisdom and awareness to recognize this world we live in, this life we have and share, as an ongoing invitation to transformation, where everything is gathered in, where it is known, it is remembered, that the holy holds all weeping as well as all celebration, all desecration as well as all tenderness. Everything is gathered in.
Would you please stand as you able, and let's sing our closing hymn, Spirit of Life. We see fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. Would you please remain seated for the postlude? Thank you for coming, and please join us at the rear now for some coffee and refreshments, and at 11:15 our second hour will begin.